have been able to build a fully functional iOS app without writing any code ourselves, right, in a matter of months. And just, for two working dads, we would have had to hire a technical partner or a development team offshore, something like that. Now we just don't have to do that anymore, right? It's remarkable how quickly our ideas can become real. And the other thing I'll just quickly say, and I'll go to that question, how has AI changed the way we build? I think counterpoint to the Duolingo story, and I'll share more about it, one of the reasons I'm the former VP of product at Coursera is that generative AI has really kind of disrupted the traditional ed tech market. So Coursera was previously the market leader in ed tech, and it was essentially bringing this experience online. Traditional pedagogy with a speaker and a bunch of slides and going through a bunch of modules and then taking quizzes and completing it. But it takes a lot of time for a professor to put together a lecture, right? And this idea that you can have AI create your content, measure your proficiency in that content, it's really disrupted the way people think about online education. And it's, again, the complexities and the cost of doing it the way Coursera has done it and the way lots of traditional universities do it is being upended by some of the things we were just talking about. Yeah, question.
So I guess, this kind of goes to you and to Matt, and so Matt was talking about how much easier it is to create content. You're talking about how, this is awesome because two dads on the side can just build an app. Matt, do you worry, or is there, bigger company worry about breaking down the barriers to entry into, or competitive advantage, right? So Duolingo has this, had this huge competitive advantage, but now it sounds like, I can just start a new Duolingo, and then it's more like Uber, where it's the brand is what is valuable.
I think you are spot on. Back when content had to be created by hand, the amount of content we had was kind of a strategic moat. Now content effectively is a commodity, and in some ways the infrastructure and processes we built in order for us to be able to create content the way we did, they maybe aren't as relevant, and maybe we need to make some changes. So yeah, I think that's a real concern, and so I think we'll probably talk about this later about what types of things you need to retain. In our case, we have a ton of data about how people have engaged with our exercises. And so in theory, we should be able to use that data to make an even better product in a world where content itself is a commodity.
Yeah, I would just quickly add to that, and we'll move to the next topic. Part of the reason Coursera got disrupted so much last year, and the stock dropped over 60%, multiple rounds of layoffs, was because the way our brains work have also changed in this era, right? So instead of buckling in for an 8-week course on data science, created by Duke University, where you get a flashy certificate at the end of it, I think our attention spans have shortened, right? There's data that shows that our attention spans now are roughly 1/3 lower than they were just 30 plus years ago, right? So the average attention span was 2 minutes, 20 seconds in the 1980s, and now it's down to about 70 seconds for the average American adult, right? So when you look at that, sitting down for an 8-week course is unrealistic. Just firing up ChatGPT and asking to solve you a problem just in time is where we are, right? You can thank TikTok and endless scroll and all these other behavioral patterns for getting us to this point. But I think it's just disrupted a lot of models that were relying on a different philosophy. And before I go on, let me actually just quickly remind you of something. I believe the fancy name for this is Chatham House Rules, but the regular person version of this is the Vegas Rules, right? So whatever we discuss here, we'll just keep it here. And if you want to go talk about it on LinkedIn or anywhere else, just abstract the names of the speakers and say, I heard at MIT, right? But don't make it about Duolingo or Coursera or any other company. Fair enough?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So the next question, back to the panel, how are you using AI day to day? Right? So pretty self-explanatory.
So many ways. So up front, a lot of prototyping business cases. It's awesome at business cases. We have built out a whole competitive intelligence framework that internally we use AI gathered competitive intelligence. So we have various processes for reviewing and updating with our in-person knowledge. Then our tech teams, and I'm not that close to it, and I think Duolingo is probably ahead on that compared to most people, but a ton of adoption of Cursor and Copilot, as sort of the early stages, which I'm sure probably most people in software are seeing. And then I think a lot of questions are being raised of how does that change the balance of when you want to keep modifying your legacy code versus build something new? Because probably for everyone who's experimented with those tools, it's actually easier to build something new than to try to get the AI often to do it right inside your legacy code. So I don't know that the answers are there yet, but as a product person, right, some part of us sees the new shiny products entering the market. You want the new shiny product too. It's very appealing. In the past, often that was a route to trouble, right? That you're losing a lot of your competitive advantage by starting over. And I think for me right now, that's really one of the interesting questions is where can we leverage the AI coding tools to learn the lessons from our past. So those are two main ones, as well as on the content side, as we've said, there's really a ton. Rethink has a lot of behavioral health training materials, a lot of wellness content, and both trying to change it all to make it shorter and catchier, automated translation, automated review. Obviously, we've recently been in this process where in the K-12 market, certain words are kind of banned now, right? And so we did a lot of AI review of all our content to remove those words. So those are some of the main ways.
I think I mostly answered that question a bit earlier. I would say on top of what I said earlier, for me, I think mostly the biggest additional thing is everything that's about writing, because I don't know if people are aware of, but Amazon really likes that writing document, and it's very time consuming to write a document, and kind of switching from being a writer to being an editor, where you basically throw out your ideas, get it to make you a draft. Obviously it's never good enough, at least right now. So you have to edit it, but it's much faster to just edit it, add a few things, and having to write everything paragraph. So I think that's really enough. Saved a lot of time. That's mostly.
For me, and I guess my team, I think we are kind of doing it in two parts. One is reducing toil, and the other is doing things that we, as product managers, couldn't do before. So in terms of reducing toil, this is anything from writing a first draft of a spec, or writing your self-performance evaluation, or making sure that when you're sending an update to senior stakeholders that you have it as crisp as possible. So for this, I personally use ChatGPT. You can pick whatever tool you like, but I think it's really, really effective. One tip I would give is, and it sounds pretty trite or basic, but it's been very effective for me. Just pick whichever one of these tools that you like, and then download the desktop client. And the desktop client probably has a keyboard shortcut to pull it up immediately. And so once I did those things, with ChatGPT desktop, for example, I think it's option space. It's massively reduced the friction for me to use it, and therefore I'm using it for more things. The second category of doing things that we couldn't do before, I think we're heading towards an era where product managers are going to become more makers rather than, whatever you want to call us, what we are today. And we're doing this through tools like Replit. We're playing with a bunch of different tools. V0, Lovable, Replit, and Cursor are the ones that are most popular right now within Duolingo. And also we use, I think ChatGPT can also be pretty good for generating images. One prompt that folks may have seen that's been pretty effective for me is you take an image in the style that you want, and then you take an image in the visual hierarchy, the structure, and then you tell GPT to say, hey, recreate the structure from X in the style of Y. Actually does a pretty good job of that. That is a quick way to get kind of more brand-aligned images so that you can either just share the still or then plug it into something like Replit and create something more interactive.
One quick thing I'd add, the #1 performing course at Coursera in 2023 and 24 was a free class, which I would encourage all of you to go look at. And it's taught by our CEO, or former CEO, and it's called Using AI as Your Thought Partner. And the basic idea here is how can you train whichever AI you like on who you are and what you do, such that when you meet a thought partner or a sparring partner, you can talk to it as a colleague in the room, or someone who has all the context on who you are. So basic tips are create a text-based version of your resume and upload it. Give it more of your career history and background on what you're doing and what it is you're trying to do. Even if you're about to walk into a meeting with someone, a super simple tip, you can go to LinkedIn, download their resume as PDF, upload it into ChatGPT and say, what are some things I have in common with this person? What are some things that we don't have in common? What's a good way to establish rapport with this person? It's incredible how well it works, right? So thought partner is the thing I would say. Excellent, so shifting gears, the next topic we have, and this is topic number 4, what are you building with AI, right? So talking about output here, right? So beyond personal productivity, what kind of software are your teams building today that simply wasn't possible before? So it's not just about moving faster, but novel solutions or entirely different spaces that you're able to actually execute on.
Yeah, so I can talk about that because we're building it right now. Like when the classic Alexa, so the Alexa you guys use every day, or Serial, whichever you prefer. There's a bunch of limitations that it has that is classic when you try to have a human interacting with like a deterministic model. We really expect consistent input that's always the same, and that's kind of limit naturally to the point you were making earlier. There's some use cases we just couldn't think, like Alexa should be able to order you Starbucks. We tried very hard for many years, but because people have their own, it doesn't seem like an impossible use case, but it's actually extremely hard to make it work. You can make it work like 80% of the time pretty easily, but to reach the level of quality bar that you want to expose it to customer, we really couldn't make it. And that's a use case that is almost overnight solved by just adding just a Gen AI layer in front of it if you want to have a quick, easy solution that just has these conversational capabilities that just cannot translate and understand all the nuance of your language and can output not the output is aligned with the deterministic model behind it's debatable, but at least it's understand all what you're trying to say and you can actually extract it and make it work. So that's a typical use case.
When will that be available? Because I've been looking
You can sign up for early access to Alexa Plus. That's available since March 1st.
I will tell you, I've
In
been
the
working
US.
on automated perfect.
In the US country, only in the US.
So I have a question about the different use cases. So it's great to spend, money and invest with using AI to invest in new businesses, new products, etc. But what about those that are live? Where you have to take into account the variable cost of using AI on a live basis for every single customer query, view, etc. That's the stuff we're looking at, like reducing the cost to make it affordable. Scalable and affordable.
Did everyone hear that question?
So it's the variable cost when you have something live with an AI like ChatGPT.
We use that. Thank you for them. And unlike these, where you could spend $1 million investing in starting a new business with AI because you're not paying them every time you use it, you're just creating content, you're creating a business. When you're using it live in the business as an interface between the people, customers, and your applications, and you have to take into account the variable cost. And it's very high. What?
Like a chatbot, does it have to pay the AI or the
Every single query is paid for, yes. And it's expensive if you do a lot of queries.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about this because this is something I'm actively thinking about. So today, our live AI products are effectively locked behind a paywall. We have 2 tiers of subscription. This is Duolingo Max is what you need to pay for. Sorry, that's my daughter. To get access to these. I think there are a few things you can do, and what I should say is I also want to figure out how to bring some of these models and these capabilities to all of our learners. Because in our case, back to Andrew's point, the company that might disrupt Duolingo probably wouldn't really care about the cost in the near term. They're going to make these available, and so people will come to expect these types of experiences for free. So, there are specific techniques that you can do that we are, for example, looking into. I think you want to cache as many of the tokens as possible. Are there specific things you can do to minimize the cost? So there's the main model, and then there are the mini models and the nano models, and then even within those models, you want to figure out what percentage of the tokens can you cache, and also depends on your use case. But if it's a use case where there's actually not that much, there aren't that many realistically possible answers and outcomes, or responses and outcomes, you can cache those. So really, I think right now the goal is to try to economize the prompt as much as possible, so it uses fewer tokens, and try to cache, two, use the cheapest model that produces an acceptable output, and three, cache as many do as much caching as you can. But of course, there is going to be some cost.
So my follow-on is just that we're tracking the effort, the compute cost, etc. for every week, and just seeing what we can do to improve that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what we do as well. And obviously, at some use cases, it might be, all right, it doesn't make sense to use GPT via API. You should actually have self-hosted models. Probably before too long, there will be on-device models on mobile, for example. I think is one thing.
Can I make one suggestion? Can you just your name and what company you're at? Because I think people are going to be intrigued by that.
All right, so my name is Robert Powder. I work for Sakana, but we're using it for an operator, it's a Microsoft operator. So it's basically another way to enter your request command without loading an application. But the key is that the cost is so high, even though when we look at other things, we'll have to raise prices significantly, from thousands to 10,000 a year. It's very expensive.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I'm sure you've already thought of is having smart limitations on how often it can be used, how much it can be used, but then that potentially breaks the experience that you want to build.
Yeah, and I would just quickly say two other things to that. One is we're introducing an AI feature that is a buy-up feature, right? And so then it's okay, is it, $5 per user per month more valuable to you to have this? And in our case, we think the answer is yes. One of our competitors is doing a similar feature and charging, and the feature is the session note at the end of a therapist session, right? Having that be audio recorded and transcribed and cleaned up by the AI for review by the therapist, right? One of our competitors pricing that at $1 a note, we're pricing it at $5 per therapist per month, right? So some of these things, obviously every case is different, but where there's quantifiable benefit, often you can pass that along. And then the second piece is, I think we all have to assume at this point that the costs will go down over time as the models get more efficient and the problem is more globally attacked. Because I know the cost of translation of content for anyone in that space has already gone down so much in the last 18 months from the parts that, again, every translation company had a database of words and they had models, but with the LLMs, the cost has gone down incredibly, but it's still a cost. But I think we're doing a bunch of planning, assuming, right, that the cost continues to go down as those technologies get better.
Just super fascinating insights. The one thing I was thinking of that's maybe uncomfortable to say out loud, but I have to believe part of how a lot of organizations imagine right-sizing their balance sheets is by laying people off and cutting staff and reducing their burn in other places, right? Which
I think what you, sorry, I think what will happen eventually is we go to smaller models, build our own models. I'm just saying eventually it will have to be that way.
Sure.
To get the cost down to very low cost.
Yeah. I thought. Sorry, Anuj, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just quickly, there are a lot of things happening. So this is Anuj from M.Quantity. I work for a telecom company. So one thing we are trying to do is not have one model. Even for a use case, we try to break down tasks, and for every task, we try to go to the optimal model. It has been complex in terms of technology solution and management. but I think from a cost point of view, that might be the future. Like you break down the task, and for each task, you kind of say, oh, this is the cheapest solution I can do. So that's like one way we should help you guys.
Before we move on, I thought I would add one quick story from my recent experience to this question of what are you building that I thought all of you might find interesting. We're all here in a classroom back at MIT, and at Coursera, we built a product called Coursera Coach. And the idea is to be an AI-powered tutor that's personalized to each learner. So if you're anything like me, a lot of the lectures in this room went over your head, and then you had to go to, office hours with the TA or recitations or something like that, right? And that's when I could ask all my dumb questions and expose my ignorance in like the corner of the room instead of in front of everybody. And so a lot of people learn in different ways. So the question is, could you use AI to build something that scales to solve that Bloom's 2 sigma problem, which basically says the closer you get to personalized learning, the more people learn, right? The better they learn, right? Basic construct. And so we built our own custom LLM and our own AI application on top of some generic LLMs from Google and OpenAI and what have you. And we trained that model on the billions of minutes of educational content that Coursera has. So that data science lecture from Duke, or the most popular course on Coursera is the Science of Happiness from Yale University. So we trained that coach on all that content, and then we asked the learners to upload their resume, tell us about their career goals, so on and so forth. And then we were able to coach them on how, to think about what classes to take to advance their career goals. If they were stuck on a given example, and I could say, can you explain, derivatives to me with toy cars, like I'm 5 years old? You could get that answer, right? And you could even ask it to give you a pop quiz to prepare for the actual test. And that quiz could even be dynamically created based on where you were strong and where you were struggling, so as to ensure your comprehension and retention would go up, right? And so this was maybe the product I'm most proud of having built in the past few years, and we won a couple of patents for it. I think like these types of useful applications of AI, where we're moving, like it's not just about serving you ads better or something like that, but it's something that could actually add value to the life of a regular person who's not a computer scientist, or just another set of eyeballs to monetize. I hope to see more of that in the industry as we move forward. So excellent. This brings us to second to last topic, which is pitfalls and challenges. Right? So for all the good things that we're talking about here, I think we can all probably share some stories about where things have not worked out so well, and where there have been challenges at the organizational level, at the product level, at the people level. I think job cuts is obviously one huge challenge that we're all thinking about, but would love to hear from the panel. And of course, I have specific questions for all of you, but I'd love to just leave it open-ended.
There are two main things that come to mind for me. One is it's important to familiarize yourself with what these models are good at and what they're bad at. Generally, they aren't so good at things that aren't really well represented in the data, which is generally what's not represented in the internet. So, for example, Duolingo just launched a chess course. GPT is really, really bad at playing chess. So for example, if we had created our chess exercises with GPT, it would have been gibberish. Why is that? Well, the notation by which chess games are recorded, that's not really as present on the internet as you might think, let alone paired with instructional content. So in that case, we're having to do a little bit more manual than we are in language learning. Other than that, another thing that comes to mind for me is just like the people aspect. I think this fear of what will this mean for my job is a very understandable and real fear. And in the case of Duolingo, we have, as Luis mentioned in his message, in his post, we have been using AI for a very long time. So probably about when I started, maybe a little bit before when I started 2.5, 3 years ago, everything was written by hand, and then essentially we moved to a interim state where instead of experts writing things by hand, experts became prompt writers and prompt engineers, and then started to review the output of the models. And this was a very scary time for folks because essentially in some ways you're asking me to create this model which in theory could replace me one day. And so I don't have the exact solution how to do this, but essentially as leaders, how do you give people a sense of safety that like on the other side of this, like the goal of this is not to cut jobs, but rather to eliminate the toil that you're doing so you could be focused on things that only humans can do.
And sorry, Luis, for everyone else.
Sorry, Luis Vanon, who's the CEO of Duolingo.
Yeah, I would say many of my issues have been more in that toil category where you have to recalibrate, like you get the 20-page report from someone and like in the past, like you would assume some certain level of effort had been put in to generate that 20-page report, and you would sort of give them the benefit of the doubt if the like argument didn't quite hold together. And I do like, I don't know how to say nicely, but the level of like crap that gets generated is sometimes high, especially in organizations that are really kind of across the board encouraging everyone to automate their toil with AI. So I think there are a few things. Like one is I do think there's kind of a management piece, like within your teams of trust and that kind of thing. Because I do think, similar to your point, Boris, about writing, I know that within the leadership team that I work with, there are a lot of people who feel so like enabled and free that they weren't great writers and it was something that they stressed about. And now they have this great like partner in being a great writer. But at some point you need to be able to say like, okay, like we're deciding what stance we take on the, I don't know, Federal Autism Registry, like we need to level on where we're at, and I don't need it packaged, like we need to have the content of the conversation. So, and then I think and then at a different level, I think with our teams, it's kind of like, yes, it's a great tool, but you're still responsible for the quality of the content, and especially with things that need to be read, you need to look at both sides of it, right? Like it's now no harder to make the thing 50 pages than to make it 2 pages, but you're still taking the time of the other people to read it, unless they're just like, I mean, I don't know, we recently got these huge RFPs back and we just like shoved them into ChatGPT and we were like, tell me which one,
Yeah, you're gonna take that 50-page report, put it back into ChatGPT, and ask for a 5-bullet summary, right? So it's garbage in, garbage out, right? If I could just quickly add an anecdote, we were over here before the start of the panel and we were discussing how many posts on social media are AI generated. And I, for one, love that it uses M dashes because it lets me tell human writing from automated writing. But the question we were asking is, if you train an AI on who you are and what you do, back to my earlier comment, and then you have it write a LinkedIn post for you or write a 20-page document for you, philosophically, is that your writing or isn't it? Right? Like, I'm not sure there's a clear-cut answer to that question anymore. But sorry, Boris, did you want to add a comment to this before we get to?
Sorry, quick question. The
Oh,
M dash, is that the human or the AI?
AI.
Okay.
Oh,
I was trained to use M dashes, so I don't want to do it now because that signals AI.
right. Oh, it's a good point. So M dashes are not unique to AI, but the average person does not write with them, right? Whereas AI loves to use it for some strange reason.
Interesting.
So when you catch that in any post, it's a huge signal that there was some AI involved in writing it.
He's the training center.
No, I was in a role with professional writing with professional editors copy editing me, and they would put in the M dashes, so I had to do it ahead of time.
Right.
This is a long.
It just was like a long dash.
Because standard grammatical, if those books on NLA or whatever tell us why.
Yeah.
That's what, it's just following, it's read the book, it's read the book.
Yeah.
Right.
There was Dave.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Quick comment on the 20-page memo. Every time that comes up, I remember Mark Twain saying, sorry for the long letter. I didn't have time to make it short. I mean, it is a communication effort, right? I mean, if I want something if I want to communicate something, I need to put in the work. 20 page has no value.
Yeah.
I see that you all using AI as a tool to foster the capabilities of your own companies and reduce costs by reducing time and humans, etc. Given the pitfalls, right? The AI at the end is a statistical that goes into the average, right? So the product tends to be average, not optimum, not excel. And also it's gonna be wide use. So I can, for example, in Alexa, ChatGPT is talking. For example, in Duolingo, I can make my own English class or Spanish class in ChatGPT. For example, in Routine, I can do my therapy in ChatGPT. So, given this, how much of a threat and how much of opportunity, and how are you going to ensure that the company that you're working on are actually not using the average? Because we see the backlash in Duolingo. People already know that AI is trash. Kind of like that mindset is general, right? You see Google, people is putting in the prompt, please give me an answer before 2020, before ChatGPT, because now the answer is a compilation of garbage, right? So how are you going to address the challenge?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. So this is a real problem. I think you can handle it. You can address it, but not fully solve it by using evaluations. So for example, you ask GPT to evaluate itself in terms of things like naturalness, accuracy, etc. Going back to the M- point, for example, I've heard that companies now that are using, or people who are using GPT are then, putting it through a filter of like, oh, anything that has an M-, throw it out because it looks too computer. So I think this is a good point. I think that the thing to think about is, what is the thing that makes your app, company, product special, and how do you make sure that you retain like uniquely human perspective on that? I think our general philosophy within Duolingo is that a lot of the toil and the doing will be taken up by GPT, but really a lot of us will become like taste makers, and taste will become far more important in a world where it's trivial to generate the content. So I guess real quick, two things. One is, or just recapping, it's just like use evals to try to smooth out some of these issues, but then there's kind of this fundamental issue, and then you have to ask yourselves, how important is, the thing that you're using for GPT for? Like, do you want to put a ton of people, in our case, on writing content, or do you feel like the thing that makes your app really, really special is something else? So the delight, gamification, etc. These types of things, we can use GPT as a thought partner and to do create initial mocks and whatnot. But ultimately, we're really relying a ton on human taste for that.
Just one thing on a few topics we discussed. I think the way I see the use of Gen AI tools in general is kind of like a force multiplier thing, right? And a lot of use cases we share about is like, how like very efficient people can get so much more. But a force multiplier kind of depends on your input. Like if your input is mediocrity, you're gonna multiply mediocrity and have a lot of mediocrity at the end. If you're not very intentional what you're trying, and you get like the first result and just take it for granted, I think that's great potential, but it needs to be pushed a little bit, and it needs you to be actively like an advanced user and like actively like push back to get to where you want it. And it has great potential to multiply what people can do already, but if you start and base level is average, it's gonna be more average. I think that's a problem that I don't know if you want to get into a societal debate about the impact on a bigger scale, but I think the big question is like, I don't think there's any real risk for like the smartest people in the room, let's just say. We're all at MIT, so I guess we cannot fall in the category, hopefully. But I do think like there's a real question about how we want to adjust society to the point you were making that I made in a few days ago. like the medium part that actually was producing something that's, you know, like if you have native, people are more prone to error than ChatGPT, to be quite honest, the average person. So,
Yeah.
but we have to think about it. I do not have any solution there, by the way.
Oh, sorry, was there a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to the back row and then the front row.
I just think that AI is the best thing that happened to me. You described the complications and like things that are really hard to deal with. But for example, I'm making mobile games. It used to take us 100 people to create a small game. It was crazy expensive, and I couldn't really start my own project because you had to have like extreme amount of resources. Now, just as an example, right? Just as an example. This is AI, fully AI. I need one person to create a story fully AI. I don't need 2D artists. I don't need 3D artists, right? I don't need like 10 people and like 10 meetings to actually create it. So I think that you two actually mentioned that it's all about creativity, right? I think that now creative people will have like the best time in their lives, and the ones who are mediocre are gonna be like struggling, which is like painful. I agree, but at the same time, you know, like good luck to the creative people, you know.
There's a few months ago there was a post by Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, and he said that he expects in a few years that we'll see the first unicorn, so 1 billion valuation company, to be a one-person company. I firmly believe that. I think it's probably already existing, or being someone somewhere is doing it right now. He's trying to start it, and he's gonna reach his valuation in about 5 years. I 100% believe that. But that's exactly what I was trying to say. Like, it has great potential if used well by very smart people like you. But yeah, it can create a lot of garbage if used as a garbage. It's a tool.
Go to the next, yes, please.
Hello. Actually, my question connects with hers.
Making mobile games too.
I'm in the creativity space too. I'm a writer. I would like to question: if I create a product, don't you think that there is a risk that in some point, if I use ChatGPT for the creative product, don't you think that there is like a risk in some point that ChatGPT said that belongs to me because I created with you?
So I have a good example because I'm actually writing a book right now with ChatGPT. One of the main reasons is I struggle a lot with white pages, and so I'm writing it's never going to be published beyond my kids, so don't worry about that. But I did actually research about that, and I had this experience firsthand. No, it does not. It belongs to you. I looked at the small line and stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. The question is it yours or not? It depends how you do it. But from my experience as a creative process with ChatGPT, it's not as easy as you think. But it's kind of what I was saying earlier about how you write a document. It's kind of switch you from being an editor. So it's a very interesting experience. I invite everybody who, just for the fun of it, because it's like, okay, let's do that. And then you read it and like, okay, no, instead I want to do that slightly different. It's kind of like a video that promotes, one of these tools, and everything is talking back and forth with an AI. Oh no, I don't want this guy. Let's find a username for this guy. Or like, oh, I want like a dragon flying in the sky. Like, what does it look like? And then it tells you, and then you edit constantly. It's very interesting. But no, it belongs to you, and I do feel like the end result, like once again, it's about like what I said earlier. Like if your story is mediocre and your idea bad, it's gonna end up with a pretty bad book. I'm not saying for you, in general. But if you have good ideas and you push it back, and again, it's really this pushing back. This is not a tool that will give you the first answer, or you get what probably you get as your report that you are describing. But if you push it back constantly and you adjust constantly, then it can get you to where you wouldn't have gone by yourself.
Let me take us to the last section, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But just to close out the pitfalls section, I thought I would share one quick story with you, again, bringing it back to academia. That product I talked about, Coursera Coach, the pitfall of that product, what we found, it was an unintended consequence. People were using it to speed through our content. 2 or 3 times faster than their normal human brain could comprehend, right? And so it's interesting when you think about using AI to write a paper or to complete an assignment. If you take all the work out of it and provide these tools that flatten the task, what are we doing to ourselves, right? So instead of taking 8 weeks to learn data science from Duke, if I'm learning it in 3 hours by using AI to speedrun everything, and then I get the certificate, and then maybe I get that job, but then maybe I get fired from that job in a few months, it's creating a different class of problems for our society, right? Where we're letting people leapfrog the task of learning and mastering certain concepts. And then you wonder, I wonder this a lot, am I like the old person complaining about the first calculator that showed up, right? And it's, now we don't have to learn how to do math by hand anymore, and what a waste, right? But then obviously that turned out to be very useful, and we up-leveled the math we do in our heads versus what we offload through the calculator. And I think that's the metaphor we have to keep in our minds with these pitfalls is how do you up-level what you do versus what you offload? And to the point about the middle of the pack being mediocre and struggling, I think that's going to happen. And I think for me, the thing I always think about is I hope there are the Sam Altmans of the world thinking about the humanity of these products as well, not just how to make them as blazingly fast and efficient as they could be. I'll get off my soapbox there. The last question for all of us, and then we'll continue to do questions from the group. Just a couple of thoughts, couple of sentences on where you think AI is going in the future. So let's kind of cap it to the next 1 to 3 years because really none of us knows. But yeah, any thoughts you have quickly to share, and then we'll open it up more.
Like I said, this isn't very revolutionary, but really on the content front, again, I'm sitting, someone's sitting on a huge library of video content that's really helpful. But again, like potentially, even 5 and 10 minute videos being long for people's attention spans, and we're getting asked for like 1 minute videos, and we're getting asked for, bullet point lists, and that the format of content will become totally interchangeable. And I think that's really exciting for everyone to the extent that it makes everything be a single slide and 1 minute. That might not be the ideal, but I think the notion that once you have content that's valuable, that AI can then put it into whatever engaging format you want and mix and match it, I think that part is really powerful.
Yeah, so I think 2 things come to mind for me. One is, I think in 3 years, we'll probably see the role of product manager and product designer, if not merge, then get very, very close to each other. I think even pre-LLMs, there was a lot of overlap between these roles, except who you worked with, and designers kind of were the only folks who were capable of creating beautiful designs. I think that will change. I think another thing that comes to mind for me is that in areas in a product where you win through iteration, running a bunch of experiments quickly, for example, copy experiments, I suspect humans will be out of the loop entirely, and AI, and maybe this gets to Carlos's point, I don't know, but AI will be proposing ideas, and you'll have those ideas hooked into something that automatically generates the UI, maybe in some cases if it's not a high criticality part of the product, and then that actually gets pushed to code and pushed to production for a small percentage of users. There's kind of this concept called explore and exploit in machine learning, and I think we'll see that a lot more with like product exploration.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're a bit of a lot of jobs are going to change drastically in the next few years. There will be pros and cons. But what it looks like in 3-5 years, I would say I think we're all gonna be kind of like in sci-fi music. Like I was just talking to you when I came in, to prepare a little bit for that. I just put the slide and was literally talking to ChatGPT in my car. I was driving there, what could I say about that? And most of the ideas were not necessarily great, but once again, when you back and forth and suddenly I appear smart in front of you, thanks to ChatGPT, I do feel like this is gonna be like very common for everybody, kind of like everybody has their phone in their pocket. When I was younger, like we didn't have that, and it feels like second nature to just that. I think this kind of like presence will be as familiar as a phone, basically, and everywhere. Question is, who's gonna own that and how it's gonna be monetized after that? It's gonna be interesting topic to see in the next few years.
If I had to add my thought there, I'll just tell you a quick story. A student of mine at Stanford, he was the first person from his family to go to college, first person from his town to go to Stanford, just a huge outlier. And he credited so much of his success to having a great guidance counselor. And so he wanted to build a guidance counselor application for high school kids around the world. But he was a humanities student, right? So he had no computer science training or anything like that. But when he graduated school, that first summer, he went out and built this guidance counselor platform using only AI for the platform, kind of like the underlying models and the front end iOS app. And he showed it to me the summer after he graduated, and it was one of those moments where I felt like I was seeing the future happen right in front of me. You have this person with no formal computer science skills building a fully functional version of his idea in just a matter of a few months from when he could really sit down and dig in. And so I think what I expect to see over the next few years is the barrier for people with ideas and passion, the barrier from them being able to go from just envisioning it to executing on it, rapidly reducing to zero. And I think, I hope that brings about a whole lot of different innovation from different types of people. This person does not look like someone who could raise a few $1 million in venture capital, right? But he got his idea and made it real, and now he probably will. And I just think that unlocks a lot of opportunity for different sorts of people around the world, and I'm hopeful that new ideas spawn from that democratized access. So yes, with that, we've got a good 10 plus minutes for more questions. Why don't I go right to left? Start here.
So just a quick comment on pushing back on the models. You can get it into a mode where it will argue with you that you're wrong. Which I've had that experience where you give it a problem or a question and it gives you an answer and you say, well, that's not right, and it tries again. And eventually it'll say, well, no, you're just not right, right? This is the answer and you're wrong. So I would offer the caution of you're still a human, and if you think it's wrong, it's probably wrong.
Let me go back there and then we'll keep going. Sure.
So, you all had a great conversation, really enjoyed it, but you're talking about a lot of product management, product design. When you actually go to commercialize it, oftentimes you need proprietary data to actually deliver value. So I just sort of, how do you think about how are all of the creators or people who are looking to commercialize a solution, what's the dynamic around getting access to the data to actually provide the value to the consumer?
Can you say a little more what you mean by data in this case?
I come out of the healthcare space, so I'm thinking I need to develop a great app or a great potential solution, but they need access to patient data, or they need access to proprietary databases. You're talking about a set of video content, do some digital twin work, but there is this, it just feels like we're gonna have a lot more prototypes chasing access to proprietary data.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, but I guess what I would say is I worked at Microsoft previously in my career, and I've spent a bunch of time with Microsoft reps talking about what they're offering in the AI space. So I do think there are, like, both, again, I think part of what we're saying is so exciting that like a 22-year-old with a humanities, undergrad can create an app. But like, if you have a data scientist, right, like assuming that there's definitely thought that has to go in, right, to how you use your health data model to power your AI, but it is very doable. And I can tell you, like, if anything, the data scientists that I work with, we're always having to like encourage them to use off-the-shelf tools rather than build out their own models. So I do feel that any I guess what I'm saying is I think in the corporate space, in the health space, there are a lot of people working to create tools within the constraints that they have. And sure, those people probably want you to pay them some money to use those, but there is a lot of thought going on there. And I think, again, it may require a little bit more expertise, but I think there's a lot of great data science going on to make those things helpful. Because I was going to say, after I said what I said about what's the future with content, I actually think, like, again, we're product people, we're talking about it from our perspective. Like, I think that entire medical diagnosis world is going to be totally changed within like 2 years, right? That how your symptoms are captured and how your diagnoses are presented and how they're evaluated, like all of that I think is really ripe for harnessing the data well and making sure that in every consultation with every patient you kind of have that whole richness. So I guess definitely harder, but I think like also being done today is what I see.
Rachel, can I build on your question? So I spent 9 years at a company that did a lot of security, and CISOs always were trying to get developers to think about building security into their process. You presumably have PII, personally identifiable information. Boris, your company, God knows, can know everything. I was playing with HeyGen the other day. There's a virtual therapist who can, do therapy with you. How do you think about, when you're using AI, Replicverse, or whatever for coding, how do you get folks to think about thinking of security first, or at least simultaneous with the building?
So developers is easy. AI is harder because I feel like, easy-ish. I think we have some very strict guidelines, and we scrap all the personal data, and like there's a bunch of techniques that we place that everybody is familiar with most likely that we use, and like private information, like we don't actually listen to people in case, like even I with like a lot of access, I couldn't like know what you say to Alexa like 3 days ago, for example, or even right now. It's like there's a very hard strict limit about it. And the problem is you have to contain the data and do this very upstream because if you let it available, potential for developer, and it's an easier thing to do because it's very hard to, especially when you are in debugging mode, you try to figure out, like, for example, some of the use case I was saying, like you're asking something and it didn't respond well. I'm trying to improve your experience. But if I want to do that, I need to know what you said, but that also means, like, do I want to listen to what your private conversation in your house? Of course not, so I can't do that. I can't. I know some people doubt it, but it's true. And so we have to like put all this process to like replicate the same kind of thing, to like, we even have distorting voice sometimes, so like distort your voice so it doesn't sound like you. There's a bunch of things that are done like that to protect it. The problem is everything that you give access to developer, very soon you get access to AI, and AI is much more likely to ignore guardrail. And that's, I think, where the most problem will be in the future, is about like, so you have to really be super intentional pretty early on, like not store anything that is not been like completely cleaned up before even you store it, like very, very early in the stage so that you don't. That's my view.
I don't know if you were coming at it from this perspective, but something we're encountering, because we're like really leaning into having more people play around with these new tools, is people just kind of downloading whatever tool, and I have done this, sorry, and I have stopped now, but kind of downloading whatever tool they hear about, it's great, and they start playing around with it, and maybe they put something in that is not public. Well, at least in our case, and you should probably assume this actually, if you don't have an enterprise agreement with these service providers, most likely they have the ability to train on your data, which means that kind of anything you put in there, you can assume that it might pop up in someone else's query, who knows when. And so from a security perspective, we're thinking about how do we make it easy to have access to these tools, the ones that we care about, while also making sure that it's safe for our data, that we're not adding things that are going to get effectively leaked, that these companies, who are mostly startups at this point, are complying with our requirements around data retention policies, things like that.
It's so interesting. I feel like OpenAI itself is built on the back of the largest data scraping operation of all time. So this conversation wouldn't even be possible without blowing past any notion of ethics or asking for permission or whatever. We wouldn't even be here if people were thinking about that. So, can you put the genie back in the bottle and start asking people to respect these boundaries now? I mean, I expect a lot more lawsuits from a lot of other people to try and fix this, but I also think it might be too late.
I want to add to you.
Sure, please. Add and then we'll go to another one.
I want to add to your comment. I mean, we're seeing cases right now, Adobe, right, that put the cloud and with the strict policies that all the creative process goes to AI. It's going down in the stock market. Now it lose all the reputation. We see Duolingo with AI first memo that they have to backtrack because, I mean, I agree that it can be possible to put the genie on their bottle, but ChatGPT has reduced the quality of the model because a lot of, we have seen it also, some platforms kicking out ChatGPT from scraping the data.
Yeah.
So I think, and people is more conscious about the data. I'm in Canap, which is a automation process, and our customers are very reluctant to provide the data to the analytics model, which is nothing AI, but they are like, data is ours, it has a value. The management already knows that data has value, even though that they don't monetize it. So I think that is gonna, the AI models are gonna get a very huge challenge to gather quality information. That's what I see.
Let me go. There was a question all the way in the back, please.
So a lot of the examples were from the consumer-facing side. So rapid prototyping, iterating fast. I'm wondering if you can add some perspective for PMs who are at the back end or the back office side, where maybe there's constraints like cost, latency. You need to have more context for what the problem is. How can you advise as to use this technology in these areas?
Anyone want to?
I mean, obviously what comes to mind a little bit is just that there's a lot of product opportunity there, right? Like at my previous healthcare staffing marketplace, right? Like evaluating documents was a huge part of it. Do you have a flu shot? And we were able to, train an AI model, and then now humans don't have to do that anymore. So I do think on the back end, there's particularly a lot of opportunity to look at anything you do where there's humans in the workflow and think about the ways to automate that. I guess I feel less close to the dev tools, but I would imagine that there's as the developers get really good at using Cursor or whatever it is, that you would want to build up your own prompts in that to try to give your code buddy as much of that context as they could have for writing the code as well.
Maybe one more quick question. We haven't come to this side of the room. Please. Then we'll wrap up.
First of all, thank you so much. Even just like this whole topic space is so complex, but you put like a beautiful framework to just like discuss it. We've talked about existentialism and M-dashes, so like it's very helpful. I'm Mukesh, I'm the director of product at Yelp. We're using AI a lot. The goal and purpose of Yelp is to connect consumers and businesses. And so one of the things we found was businesses are too busy to sometimes even pick up the phone. 40% of calls that happen on Yelp are missed today, so it's just value wastage in some ways. So one of the things that you mentioned, Dev, that really kind of like struck out was, I hope we're thinking about the humanity of this. So like our solution to that problem is let's build an AI receptionist to answer the phone for these businesses, for like the 7 million of them. So we're worried that's going to put a lot of receptionists out of work. So when you say, think about the humanity of this, what do you guys see as the role of humans in the end state?
Ooh, what a deep question to end this on. Does anybody have a profound answer? I have a thought, but please.
Profound, no. Shallow answer. Do you want a shallow answer?
Yeah, it has to be short. So.
Well, Yeah, I want to take this because I think I've talked a couple of times already in this kind of field. I personally find it very interesting. I'm listening to, I forgot his name, the CEO of Google DeepMind during the Google I/O.
Yes.
I saw an interview of him a couple of days ago, and he was basically building on the same thing that Sam Altman from OpenAI is saying. Like, I think there's a reason why the biggest, and Dario also said something about that, all of these people are all talking about universal income in all their talk, and I think it's kind of like tied up to what I was saying earlier a little bit about how these are great tools for brilliant people, and there would be kind of like what we said, and you said also, like there's an opportunity for people who want to buy, like your student. There's a great opportunity for tool for that, but I think sometimes in the discussion we don't talk about people who don't want to build things, which I think is a large majority of people. And I don't mean it in an elitist kind of way. I don't judge anyone, but I think like I think it's an opportunity to rethink a bit how we talk about that, and the fact that all these CEOs of this company are very conscious. The figures you were talking earlier as well, how many blue collar jobs likely, white collar jobs are likely to disappear very soon. I think this, like, sure, like to your example, there will be a receptionist potentially out of a job. Now, if we think about it from a broader perspective, like, is it a great job to be a receptionist in a restaurant? Like, would rather potential, I think we're on the verge of a bit of a, that's my own personal view, but we're a bit of a transfer, hopefully, we're gonna be transformed. For the good or the worse, it's gonna depend on, probably not us, but how we're gonna take this transformation. And I do feel like we have to think about what is humanity, and is humanity defined by what work you're doing. Like, are we valuable to society right now from the value you create from our work? Or from, for example, some people are talking about how you create value by, that might be a bit hot topic, but like create a lot of value as a consumer, for example. Like, we're a bit in a content economy right now. If you ask some smart person, would you rather have $1 million or like 1 million followers on Instagram, you probably would say, I'd rather have 1 million followers. It has more value than actual money. I would not, but I'm terrible at content. Just, what I'm saying is, like, I'm rambling a little bit, but it's a great question, but I feel we have to think about the broad picture on what will the world look like when we actually don't need so many people to work, and we don't have enough work for so many people. But do they actually need to? Is it how you define humanity? I don't know.
Sean, are we at time? Do we need to?
Are at
interrupt?
time, it's such a rich discussion.
Let me just close by saying a couple quick things. First off, what did I say the average attention span was? 70 seconds, right? So thank you for blowing past your limits and giving us as much of your attention as you could muster. I do think it's a wonderful question. Oh yeah, it's a wonderful question to end on. And I'd also make a quick plug. In the Career Development Office, we are trying to build a more scaled community to continue these conversations. We're calling it the Community of Practice. The first one we're going to be launching is the Product Management Community of Practice, and it's essentially meant to be a Reddit-style forum for all of us to keep having these conversations on a daily basis. So keep an eye out for that. We aim to launch the first version of it later this summer, earlier this fall in the new school year. But I would encourage you to all leave with that question and think about that. I just think there's so much more to unpack and figuring out what it means to you. I'll also say, once again, thank you for coming to this session. Ask ChatGPT for a 5-bullet summary of Nelson's book, so you'll be caught up. And have a great rest of your reunion. Thank you so much.